Welcome to Born on the Bayou Sports, a Houston sports show made for Houstonians by Houstonians. Join Tim Costello and Scott Barzilla every week as they break down the latest in Houston Astros, Rockets, and Texans news. Tim's a former minor league broadcaster, and Scott has written 2 books on the Baseball Hall of Fame. Yeah, if Javier could get it figured out, it would make things a lot easier because he was that guy everybody was counting on this year to be a Cy Young candidate, take that big step forward and help anchor this rotation with Fromber.
Since he's come to Houston, you can look at the development of guys like Carlos Correa defensively, Jeremy Pena defensively. I mean, you can know Alex Bregman's, certainly I think a better than average third baseman.
And now you're putting teams in 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9. Now here comes Will Anderson. Pin back your ears, let's go. So if you're Bayou born and bred, or just like spending time in the H, sit down, relax, and stay Houston strong. Welcome all my friends for the first time back here in a couple of weeks in Born on the Bayou Sports. Tim Costello, Scott Barzilla coming to you hot on a November cool evening here in Texas.
Well, speak for you, Tim. It's not really cool down here. But, I was going to say we are doing some show shifting, so to speak. And one of the things I wanted to shift is obviously the bane of podcast existence is going negative. I think, negative conversations kind of stir the pot more than positive conversations. So I just want to tell a little positive tidbit, and I'm going to adjust my camera here. And as you can see in the camera, I'm wearing my Saints sweatshirt. As Tim, I think, can fully relate to, I am Saints fan adjacent because I am married to a Saints fan. I know you can relate to that, but I don't know if you've heard what's been going on with Pope Frankie lately, Tim.
I know they're looking for a new coach. One of my golf buddies is a Saints fan. He's like, I can finally watch the Saints again now that they got rid of Dennis Allen.
Well, Pope Frankie apparently has been going to the old, we'll just call it Twitter machine, and he's been using the hashtag Saints.
Oh God,
not realizing that the Saints have trademarked this hashtag. And the Saints are now 1-0 since Pope Frankie has been pumping up the Saints. So maybe God does have a plan.
Yeah, we all thought he was a Peyton Manning fan a few years ago when they kept making all those long kicks. Lo and behold, no, it is the team named after the Saints. It would actually make sense that if God had a football team, it's the Saints. Oh, Scott, brain teaser time. We often talk about the worst free agent signings in Houston Astros history. I want to turn the tables today, Scott. Who is the best free agent signing in Houston Astros history?
Oh, wow. So here's my question, Tim. Are we talking about like single season performance, or are we talking like over the span of a career?
Justify it how you want, but who came to town and was the most worth the money?
Oh, the most worth the money, I think, is easily, in my book, Nolan Ryan. Because he was the first $1 million a year player, but basically he played for $1 million a year from 1980 through 1988. So, I mean, that's 9 seasons. And I can certainly defend a vote for Roger Clemens. I think that's a good vote. I mean, JV is technically not a free agent since we traded for him. So, I mean, those are the 2 that pop into my head immediately.
I'll give you one, Charles Morton.
Yeah, well, that's
has to be in the conversation.
2 years, yeah.
And you know what? One that never gets enough love. I think Carlos Lee was everything you paid for. I think he delivered on every single thing you asked him to do, minus the last year of a 6-year deal. It's just the Astros failed him. But I think if you look at what the Astros signed Carlos Lee to do, he did it to a T. And I think in today's baseball, if you got that guaranteed output over 5 years, you take that contract in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I don't think it rises to the level of Nolan Ryan or Roger Clemens, but because I think they're more impactful, and because of the team success involved.
And I think Charlie Morton is just as impactful for the reason of team success, and from the fact that he closed out the World Series Game 7 championship. When you look at memorable moments in Astros history, Charlie Morton's on the mound for literally the biggest one of them.
Yeah. So if you're going, the quickest bang for buck, you can't go wrong there. It's only 2 seasons, but they were very impactful 2 years.
2 career-changing seasons for Charlie Morton too, right? This is a guy who was 1 bad season from being done in professional baseball, and he turned those 2 Astros seasons into 6 more professional years after that.
Well, more than that.
High paid.
20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and he's coming back for 2025. He just announced.
Yeah. So, one of the greatest Brett Strom finds of all time.
And Brett Strom, I don't know if you saw this today, is now a Pittsburgh Pirate.
Honestly, that's exactly what that organization needs. Something to get young players excited after what they did to Rowdy Tellez and some of the other guys there last year. But
imagine the Skeens. That's going to be.
Speaking of coaching changes that got people excited, the Texans had the city ready to roll. They're off to the fantastic start. They're 4-1. They're 5-1. Now here we are sitting at 6-3.
6-4.
6-4. Back-to-back losses. Both, I think, deflating because of the way the defense played. You've lost 3 or 4 where the defense has balled out in all 3 of your losses. This is one of the most amazing defensive performances I've ever seen. You picked off Jared Goff 5 times. He was spiking the ball into the dirt on a regular freaking basis. He wasn't even trying to find receivers because there was nowhere to go. He just threw it in the dirt. And you found a way to lose that game. Part of it's play calling. Part of it's missing open receivers. Part of it was some offensive line, but it was better than it had been. But, man, this one doesn't sting. There's no way around saying this loss sucked.
Well, let me go you a couple of more there. Number 1, that is the first time literally in my lifetime that a team has intercepted a quarterback 5 times and lost. The last time I think was 54 years ago. I am not 54 years old. So that literally first time. Number 2, what are the odds of you just in a season, not much less a month, being +3 in the turnover ratio and twice and losing both times?
It's insanity. It's absolute. And to have, I could understand if you were trotting out Davis Mills, and your quarterback's hurt and you're trying to just squeeze out a win. But that's not the case. You've got a healthy CJ Stroud. You've got a healthy Joe Mixon. And you've got at least one of your trio of wide receivers out there to go make plays. Like, there's enough talent on the field that what's happening shouldn't be happening because they show explosiveness in the first half, Scott. They're able to build up leads. And then all of a sudden, foot comes off the gas.
Well, not only that, but you have 3 field goals.
Yeah.
One of which at least one, when you have first and goal in the 3, you have to punch that sucker in. That's inexcusable. And then, of course, you come out of the second half, first play of the half, you throw an interception. At that point, I could see it happening. At that point, I was like, we're losing this damn game.
But then you get the pick right back.
Yeah, you get the pick right back. And then you have Tank Dell wide open in the end zone, and CJ Stroud inexplicably, number 1, waits to throw it and then aims the ball, not getting enough on it. And there's another pick.
Yeah. There's definitely been a little bit of regression this year from CJ. I don't think that's unfair to say. I think a lot has been asked of him too. I think coming in this year, you put a lot on CJ Stroud. I think he's asked to do a lot with the offensive line that's in front of him. And I think we're looking at the consequences of a guy who takes a lot of hits and a guy who takes a lot of sacks, and then feels like he has to gain that back with big chunk plays constantly. He has the most 3rd and longs outside of Deshaun Watson in the NFL.
I think the biggest thing, and if we're going to point the arrow where I think we are both pointing it, I think that we are forgetting this is a second-year quarterback. And the thing is, with second-year quarterbacks are still growing. And I think that the problem is that your offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick, after a great rookie season, thinks, here's Aaron Rodgers in his prime. Let's just let him cook. Well, that sounds great when you have a veteran like, say, a Patrick Mahomes who's at the height of his career. That sounds great to let them cook then. But this guy's still growing as a quarterback. I still think he doesn't have an internal clock good enough to realize that my first target is not available to me. I can't fit it into Xavier Hutchinson. That can't be an option. I have to have a safe valve somewhere, a back out of the backfield, tight end. And those guys are there, but he's going to hold on to the ball and he's going to try to make a 30, 40-yard chunk play. And that's what young quarterbacks do. They don't have that maturity yet to sit there and say, it's not happening this play. I need to check this sucker down, gain maybe 5 or 6 yards, and move on to another play.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think you hit the nail on the head in that. Last year, Bobby Slowick schemed up a lot to get guys open for CJ, right? I think the scheme was more intricate. There were a lot more stick to the play call. This is what we're going to run to get this guy open type of calls. Where I think this year, there's a lot more options at the line of scrimmage for CJ. And he's getting up there. And again, you're handing him full reign of everything in year 2. And we just need a little more scheme, right? Like, I think that's what you're saying is there's not enough scheme. There's too much. Hey, get to the line of scrimmage, identify the mic, identify coverage, tweak routes, hot route to this. Okay, go. He didn't see it right. Or, hey, they talk about it on the telecast, right? On that the Hutchinson play that you mentioned, everybody's wondering why is CJ sitting in the pocket there? Get him on the move, get him rolling right. That way, if it's not there, he can pick up the 3 fucking yards that we need with his legs, right? Like, is he Michael Vick? No. But is he a guy that with the momentum carrying him in that direction, if the defense is flowing this way and it's not open, straight ahead, 3-4 yards, slide, get down, keep the fucking drive moving. But instead, because in Bobby Slowick's mind, a field goal in that situation was good enough, he was willing to just take a quick, safe little opportunity over the middle. If it's not there, 56 yards, we got it. Whatever, we got it, right? Oh, no, we don't got it. We gave him a short field. Now, here we go. Fucking classic Texans. Here we go, right?
Yeah.
And it's just this team, since its inception, Scott, through Dom Capers, through Gary Kubiak, through Bill Belichick, through Bill O'Brien, through David Culley, through Lovie Smith, and now on to D'Amico, kick way too many fucking field goals. To the point where, like, one of my consistent fantasy football draft theories has always been draft the Texans kicker. For 10, 15 years, this has been a strategy. Doesn't matter who the kicker is. Doesn't matter if it's Kaimi or Nick Folk or Amendola or whoever. It doesn't matter if it's a fucking running back off the street. They're still fine taking the field goal because that's been the fucking franchise's philosophy since Chris Brown, day one.
Hey, AFC South Division champs, Brian.
And it's funny because I use that a lot. I really do. But it's also so we're just fine being mediocre, Brian. Is that what it is too? Right? Like, Bill, is that like, it's funny. It's so frustrating. Like, the philosophy has just always been take the 3. 3's good enough.
Here's the thing, Tim. Do you see any other AFC South team getting to 7 wins?
No.
I mean, maybe the Colts get to 7-10. So is the bar, hey, we're 8-9, we're AFC South champions, we're 9-8, let's fucking go? Is that where we're at? I mean, and I get it. You're going to get Nico Collins back. That's going to help. I mean, and I'm going to get to, my hat tips. I'm going to get to my scumbags. It's all going to be interrelated. I've seen about enough of Xavier Hutchinson. I've seen enough of him. He doesn't get any separation. And we've seen it. Robert Woods, he's okay for an occasional catch. But, I mean, that couldn't have been the plan. The plan couldn't have been, hey, get it to Hutchinson over the middle. You can't watch that game and watch every play that he's played and see the lack of separation and go like, that's our plan. We're going to die on that hill.
I see what you're saying, but I also think that Slowick's the kind of guy who's like, I'm going to outthink everybody, and we're going to hit Hutchinson over the middle for a slant, and he's going to be open. Because I don't even hate the idea, but like if that's what you're going to do, at least go to get Robert Woods in that spot, right? Give me the fucking 10-year vet who has made a career of making big third down catches, not the guy he drafted in the 7th round who, as you said, has no separation.
Well, and so here's my question, Tim. So I'm going to give you 3 possibilities. And I think all of these have some level of blame here. But I'm just going to ask you the question of who is more to blame. Is it A, the players? Is it B, Slowick? Or is it D'Amico Ryans for, continuing this train going without apparently putting his foot down?
That's a great question. I mean, I think obviously if the offensive line does its job, Bobby Slowick might look like a genius if Stroud has time to do this, right? But then again, a good coordinator knows what his team is playing with and will adjust accordingly. So I still feel like at the end of the day, I don't want to say D'Amico's done his job because, his job is to coach the whole team. But, this team has a tenacity. This team has a swarm mentality. D'Amico's instilled what he's going to instill, and then you're trusting your offensive coordinator to just call the fucking game, right? And I think at the end of the day, the calls are what's most questionable sometimes. We're predictable as fuck on offense. 2 runs and a pass. Book it. Book it, Dano.
And I'm not going to sit here and because I already have my horse's ass picked out. And it's neither of these guys that we've discussed. So I feel okay saying this. I don't know if you heard D'Amico's comments about the Titus Howard play. I texted you about that play.
I did, yeah.
And I don't know if you watched that play, that replay. But D'Amico Ryan's trying to sell us on, well, no, he was just trying to hold C.J. Stroud up. No, D'Amico. I can see. My eyes work. I had eye surgery. I have pretty decent vision, and I could see that Titus Howard tried to take the ball away. Was he trying to help the team? Sure, I guess you could make, in a case that a 300-plus lineman is going to take the ball from his quarterback and amble on about 15 yards to get the first down. Yeah, no, I don't think that works. But stop propping your guys up. Stop making excuses for them. Laramie Tunsil got his ass beat on that play. And, the excuse was, well, we had some problems with the cadence and that. No, your left tackle got his ass beat. You don't even have to call his name out. You can just say that, the protection up front just wasn't what we thought it was going to be on that play. Titus Howard also quit on his block. I mean, that's part of the reason why this play happens. And so, to me, we need some brutal honesty. You cannot defend your guys anymore. When your guys are playing like dog shit, it's time to say that they're playing like dog shit. I love the idea of protecting your guys. And there's ways to say it without calling out specific names. But it's time to sit there and say, we need some guys to step up.
I agree. Like, they keep saying we're having players only. They had a players only meeting. There's another players only meeting coming. Like, you got a room full of guys that came to Houston with the expectation they're going to be really fucking good this year, right? Like, Joe Mixon came to Houston with high expectations. Diggs, although no longer part of the guys on the roster, came to Houston with the expectation he's going to help push this team over the edge. You've got guys within who came into the season thinking this is the year. So the players only meetings, I get it, but you're right. Like, guys have to be held accountable. And I think sometimes as a young head coach, you don't want to go too far the other way because it's tough to get it back, right? Like, once you cross too far over to that other side and you bite off a little bit more, it's tough to unchew that, right? You can always get a little bit tougher, but you can never truly dial it back and get that relationship back to where you had it. So I think that's a fine line that he's trying to walk as a former player. But yeah, when your left tackle misses the block and your right tackle tries to take the ball and run forward with it like this is fucking The Blind Side, I don't know what else to say. Like, I mean, that's like Hollywood dumb, not another teen movie kind of bullshit, right? Like, it doesn't even happen in the real movies about football. It happens in the satire ones that make fun of those movies.
No, I can tell you what it is, Tim. Titus gets $50,000 for every fumble recovery. So, why not create your own fumble? And then you landed on the ball. It would be like, say Fred VanVleet say, you know what? I think I can score 10 tonight, but instead of going after 10 assists, I'm going to throw the ball out of bounds 10 times. I got a double-double. I got 10 points, 10 turnovers. Pay me more. I mean, it's that level of ridiculousness.
I mean, that's literally what people make fun of, like, Angel Reese for, right? Like, where she gets a double-double, but 8 of her rebounds are like her own missed layup attempts that she then rebounds and puts it back up again.
Yeah, I mean, it's like those Leon commercials. And do you ever remember those Leon commercials? Oh no, it's like the guy Leon in the locker room is like, I can't do this alone anymore. I need some help. And then the reporter's like, so your 4 fumbles didn't play a role in your mind? You didn't see anybody else falling on it? So I guess there's no I in team. Yeah, they ain't no we either.
So, Scott, let's try and put a positive spin on it and look forward to next week. Texans are the Monday Night Football game against the Cowgirls. Prime time, again, 3rd week in a row. There will be no glare to distract any of the players. This one's a night game. Could you believe, Jerry? Like, he started talking about the fucking moon at one point. Like, someone said, like, that's what happens when your owner is like 8 Johnny Walkers deep after the game and you hit him with that shit.
Well, I was going to say, can we do this so solid and please just take Jerry off the air? I mean, can we do that? I mean, and then to sit there and he's like, well, I've investigated the whole Michael Parsons, comment situation. I've talked to everybody involved. And it's like, so we're at the point now where the owner's yanking in guys. Okay, so I heard this on your podcast. What were you thinking there? Let's see, Mike McCarthy, what do you think of this? I mean, is that really where we're at?
I think it is. Like, I don't know how you own the team, right? Like, first of all, this is like when the cops investigate themselves and they're like, we did an investigation and we found no wrongdoing. You're just like, obviously, like, yeah, of course. Like, do you really think like a Jerry Jones-led investigation is going to go anywhere? I got to think a fucking episode of Blue's Clues has a little bit more detective work than anything that Jerry Jones is going to put together at this point. Like, I got to think his kids have like a coloring book and like they're like leading him through an activity like maze or whatever it is. Like, okay, Jerry, here's the next clue as to why your team fucking hates your coach. All right, let's watch this, and this is why. It's just insanity. Like,
well, and I was really rooting for Trey Lance to get the start.
Oh, he looked terrible when he came in too, man.
Yeah, because I was like, we could see another 4 or 5 interception game if he gets in there. And let's look at what the Dallas Cowboys have put up at home. Have they? I don't think they've won at home yet this year, have they?
I don't know. I don't know if they have.
I don't think so, and I think they're averaging well over 20 points per loss. I mean, I
It's
think the Texans are 7-point favorites. On the one hand, we've only won one game by more than a touchdown. But on the other hand, I don't know that I could trust the Cowboys to keep it a game.
I could trust Bobby Slowick to keep it a game.
Yeah,
Like
I could.
if they get up 28-0, like I see just a steady diet of handoff and play action on third down and just like try and get out of there with a 28-20 victory and hope for the best, right? Like I want to see this team beat the fuck out of the Cowboys, right? Like that's just like how do you not, right? As a Houston fan living in Dallas, flying a Houston Astros flag in his front yard as we speak, I want my team to rub it in their face and do it for 4 fucking quarters, not for 2.5, and then call the dogs off and barely get out of there.
Can we get the NFL on, for a mercy killing and say, like, let's take the Cowboys off of prime time for the rest of the year?
It'll never happen because Jerry
It'll never
Jones.
happen because they're going to put the Giants on in their stead.
I was about to ask you,
Yeah.
who would you rather? Would you rather have a Giants primetime game or a Cowboys primetime game right now?
I have more Schadenfreude watching the Cowboys get their
I
ass
was
kicked.
thinking the same thing. There's just the Schadenfreude factor. Like the Giants are just awful to watch, but it is fun to watch the Cowboys lose. Like that is something I do take a little pleasure in.
Yeah, so I think this next week, I think this is hopefully a get well game for the Texans. And I think, Slowick was doing some good things in the first half with playing more of a speed game. And obviously the blocking was better in the first half. All 4 sacks. Oh, wait, did 1 sack happen in the first half, I think?
I think so.
And then 3 sacks in the second half. So, and I understand that, when your offensive line sucks, that your options are not that limited. But see, here's the thing. We haven't scored a second half touchdown in a month. I want to know what Bobby Slowick's doing at halftime. And that's the other thing where, D'Amico's kind of trying to prop everything up. Well, we're constantly doing adjustments. And it's like, yes, you and Matt Burke are constantly doing adjustments. Is your offensive coordinator doing adjustments?
Yeah, I think he is. I think the adjustment is, hey, I've got this whole playbook to use to start the game. Okay. And then when we get to the second half with the lead, I've got these 3 pages that I've got this this is with lead second half plays. And then the rest of the sheet is first half plays. So he is adjusting to this tiny fucking portion of second half with lead.
Yeah. And of course, what makes it worse is that your starting running back, who is one of the top 5 running backs in the NFL, no questions asked, has less than 2 yards of carry. I mean, clearly
because everybody in the fucking world knows that if the Texans are going to have any success, that Joe Mixon needs to get a bill on the ground, right? Like the easiest way to shut the Texans down right now is to stop the run and force CJ Stroud into 3rd and 10 because we run it first and second down 80% of the fucking time.
When was the last time? I mean, we don't do hardly any screens. We're not doing play action.
How about a fucking wheel route into the flat? How about like let the blitz come and just loft a little wheel route out there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's inexplicable, and it was like watching a car wreck in slow motion. I mean, you ever had that feeling when you're watching something happen and you're like, I know this is happening and I'm powerless to stop it.
It was a similar feeling to the Chiefs playoff game where like obviously our season's not over and it's not the same high stakes, but like I never felt comfortable in that playoff game getting up where we did. And the moment, like you said, the moment we threw a pick to start the second half, here we go again. Texans on primetime, here we go again. And like I hate primetime games, Scott. I really do. I hate waiting all fucking day to watch this shit. Or this is the second half, right? Like, I don't know. It's frustrating, but again, I think you're right. The Cowboys just seem to be a dumpster fire like that, or like. If Jerry Jones wasn't outside of football the businessman that he is, because I think you do have to give it credit. Like he has leveraged the Cowboys brand to a maximum in this city, makes a lot of money off of it. If he wasn't that level of a businessman, this team would be viewed like like the fucking Carolina Panthers, right?
Yeah, I mean, right now, and I think what's really sad is that you could see this coming from a mile away. I mean, number one, when you retained Mike McCarthy, and it's like this guy's dead coach walking him before you played a game. And number two, when you sat there and waited until practically September to sign CD Lamb and Dak Prescott, why did we wait? Why did you wait that long? You knew you were going to pay them. You had to pay them probably a magnitude of combined 20 million more a season than you probably would have if you had just done it, the very first thing out of the gate in the offseason. It doesn't, and that 20 million a year probably would have been enough to get Micah Parsons done, and you would have had all three of your stars locked in.
Right. And I think now Parsons will never resign, right? I got to think he's outie. I gotta think Mike McCarthy is done at the end of the year. He never should have been hired in the first place. But again, that goes back to the Cowboys' ineptitude. You have a guy who was given one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game, and you got one fucking ring out of him? You got one fucking Super Bowl ring out of Aaron Rodgers at a time where his best competition in the AFC North was Jay fucking Cutler. He had a ticket to the playoffs every single year, and you couldn't scheme up enough offense for Aaron Rodgers to get more than one ring. You get the fuck out of here. Why would I even take an interview with you, let alone hire you?
Well, and the fact that he lied about, I watched all this tape and he didn't do jack shit. And I don't know if
But all you have to do is look at the fucking Packers games to realize that like their game plan was let Aaron Rodgers play backyard football and run around and find guys open late after like 6-7 seconds of being unblocked and throw it deep and let somebody make a play at the end of the game. Like
I am not a Michael Parsons fan. However, when I listened to that and he let it slip that, some of these veterans are here when the coach is not here. And I'm like sitting there thinking, that's truth. It's not wrong. And you've put the offense in his hands and you've given him no running game. You would take a gifted offensive coordinator to take the Cowboys offense and do, amazing things with it. And he's not gifted.
I don't even mind that they didn't go spend big money in the offseason on a running back, right? Like, if you have a good enough offensive line, you can draft a guy straight out of college that's good and put him behind a dope offensive line, and he'll be successful. See Zeke Elliott, his first year or two in the league, right? Like, that Cowboys offensive line just churned out 1,000-yard rushers for quite some time because it was a monster. But that's not that line anymore. And then you didn't even prioritize it in the draft. You didn't go pick a guy high in the draft to come be the running back of the future. You got a guy late. You got some, undrafted free agent, 6th, 7th round type talent, but you didn't prioritize it either through the offensive line or through an elite running back who could make people miss. And it's just mind numbing that you would ignore it from both angles, right? Because you can have an elite running game without paying a super expensive back if the offensive line is good enough. And theirs is not, because you had to pay $70 million to Dak Prescott. You've got to pay CD Lamb record-breaking receiving money because you let him sit there and watch all of his counterparts get more and more and more and more, to the point where, as you said, it cost you an extra $20 million because you let everybody else get their deals first. That should have been done 2 years ago. The moment you trade Amari Cooper, you extend CD Lamb and go, you're our guy for the next however long.
Well, now my question is with Dak Prescott, how many quarterbacks in the NFL are better than him?
10 or 12, maybe.
So are you paying somebody who's not even in the top 10 $60-70 million a year?
No, but they put themselves in that position.
Yeah, I mean that's and I don't. To me, I like CD Lamb. Fine, he's no Justin Jefferson. He's not. He's not Jamar Chase. I mean, I don't.
Is Tony Romo, in your opinion, heads and tails better than Dak Prescott was right now?
I don't know if head and shoulders better.
I think they're pretty similar quality players.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
I'm wrong. Tony
yeah.
Romo
No,
got top level money his whole from the moment he got a contract, he got top level money.
no.
Like they
You're not
determined he
wrong
was the
there.
guy and they paid him to be the guy.
But that's what I'm saying is like you're paying two guys like they're the best at their position. CeeDee Lamb's not the best receiver in the NFL. I don't know anybody who thinks that.
Right, but when you wait till a week before training camp and you realize I got nothing without these two guys on offense, you're right. You got to pay more.
Well,
For a guy who is a good businessman, Jerry let himself be worked over a
and
fucking.
Jamar Chase, I'll tell you what, Jamar Chase may have saved Ann from some serious embarrassment because she is in a high stakes fantasy football league. She did not know anything about fantasy football. In fact, she let it auto draft. And so she's got like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. She's got like all these like stacked wide receivers, but her quarterbacks suck and her running backs suck. Well, Jamar Chase just put up 50 plus fantasy points. Now, what's the stakes? I tell you, last place has to go through with a dare. The best dare that she can go through with is that she has to sit in a Waffle House for 24 hours. And the only way she can get out of that is that she gets 1 hour taken off for every waffle she eats.
How many waffles do you think you could put down?
If you spaced it out, I could probably get down 4 or 5.
I think if I'm medicated, I could do like 6 waffles. So either way, I'm still in a fucking Waffle House for 18 hours.
I'm not playing the damn, name that tune. I could do that in 6 waffles.
I think 6, I think I could do 6 waffles if I went in like elevated, munching.
Well, but like I said, fortunately, I think Jamar Chase, she was tied for last place. I think Jamar Chase got her a win this week. So, she's okay for right now.
Speaking of wins this week, Scott, the Rockets starting to play some good basketball. A little bit of a lull to start the year. Lost some games that maybe looked winnable. But now all of a sudden the team's starting to get rolling a little bit, starting to find its identity. Players are kind of maybe understanding their roles a little bit more this year. And I think this team, especially since Cam Whitmore has transitioned to the G League, is starting to flow a little bit more and playing some very good basketball.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I think I think there's one positive you're going to get to in one of your hat tips, so I'm going to kind of leave that one aside for the time being. But I think my biggest overall hat tip in terms of this team has been Jalen Green. He hasn't had every game be balls out, all-star level play, but there were games last year where he just flat didn't seem interested and disappeared. I think he has been present in every one of these games. He's done something to help them at least stay in the game. And then there's been, of course, some games where he balls out and he's, the best player on the floor. I think if you're going to go between the two big money players right now, Sengun has definitely been the more disappointing of the two.
However, the last 2 games have been good Sengun games too.
Right, they have. But he's been more inconsistent. I was expecting more consistent production from him than certainly Jalen Green. But I think top to bottom, there's just more on this team than has been in the past. I think there's one guy we're going to get to in the hat tips that I'm going to leave for that purpose. But I think on the bench, Steven Adams has shown some toughness off the bench, getting some tough boards. I think Eamon Thompson, has taken a step forward this year. He's still not a star player because of his lack of shooting ability, but I think he's doing enough to be a weapon, at least off the bench. And, of course, you've got those veterans like Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks who, may not be star players. I mean, they're probably overpaid if you're looking at, from the prism of what you normally get out of players making that kind of money, but they're showing up every night and they're doing stuff.
You mentioned Eamon Thompson, not necessarily great shooting. 2 of 2 from 3 tonight. Double-double. Rockets up 8, under 4 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter for Eamon. And I couldn't agree more with you on uh, um, Adams. On
Yeah.
Adams, Eh, there were times last year where it just seemed like it was the fucking Olay right down Main Street. Have at it. And every good basketball team has a guy that, hey, I've got 6 fouls tonight. I'm going to at least use 4 or 5 of them, right? Like, I'm going to get my fouls in. I'm going to play physical tonight. I'm going to give you 20, 22 minutes off the bench, and they're going to be painful for the other team. That's what playoff teams have. You got to have a fucking banger, right? You've got to have somebody go in there and let them know, like, that's just not going to fly when I'm in the game. I mean,
And
even
yeah,
late in his career, Dikembe Mutombo did that for the Rockets. Like, Mutombo will come in for 20 minutes and let you know, like, you're not coming down here without one of fucking these coming your way. It doesn't always have to be I'm going to put you on your ass, but it does need to be I'm blocking your shit. I'm getting it out of here. Steven Adams is a physical, intimidating guy who's not going to let you just own the paint. And if Sagoon's having a night where he's getting pushed around down low, it's nice to have a guy like Steven Adams to say, okay, go slow down the big fella.
yeah, he's not playing tonight because I think they're still
He's been banged up for a little bit.
well, they came out of camp and they said that, pretty much I don't think he's going to be playing back-to-backs, for a
But he's
while.
missed 3 or 4. He's missed 2 or
Yeah.
3 the last game. He's been banged up, but
Yeah,
he's not playing back to backs, which I hate
they're
Jock Landale. If not nothing personal against him, but if the situation with Adams is going to be the way it is, give me another veteran who also can't play back to backs and space those guys off of each other and have two of a similar type player because Jock Landale gets bullied in the paint way too often.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what he's there for. I mean, he was, really played well for Australia in the Olympics. But yeah, it's yeah, I mean, he does, I guess he it depends on the minutes, but I think it's unfortunate that basically they came out in the beginning of the year and they said, they all but admitted that Adams is going to be limited to maybe 40 or 50 games this year, just because, they don't want any setbacks. And he's on board with that, which is, I think, the best thing. And so he's a guy that if you're strategic, you pick the right opponents. Hey, go out and give me 15, 20 minutes against this team that has a good big. And that's the kind of thing you want from him.
I agree with you on that. I'm just saying tonight, Jock Lando's got 17 minutes tonight.
Yeah.
You've got to have a better option than that. And if you know if you know Adams is only going to play, say, half the games, give me another older veteran. Give me a beefy guy. Like, give me something other than Jock Landale, who is not going to get pushed around the way that he does.
Yeah, because that's the problem. I think when you look at this team, the one thing they're missing is, without Steven Adams, who is another big 4 or 5 on this team other than your starters?
There isn't. Like, when Adams doesn't play, you spend more time doing a combination of Jabari Smith and Sengun playing center and everything else. Like, you go small when Smith comes out. I mean, when Sengun comes out, they move small and go Smith at center for a fair amount of it, and then Landale will spell both of them and play his 17 minutes a game. But I don't know, man. I just think what Adams brings is valuable, but there's other players who can do that in small stretches when he's not available. And I'd rather find a player similar to that than a completely third type of skill set center that Jock Landale is that maybe doesn't translate to what this team needs.
And so, this team, assuming, knocking on wood here, we win tonight's game, that's 8-4. However, I would caution everybody that we really haven't played anybody yet. We did play OKC. We lost to OKC. But really, other than that, I can't think of a really good opponent that we've played. And so the schedule is going to get to the point where there's going to be a crunch where it's going to look like this team is playing worse because we're playing tougher opponents. And we have to remember that really, outside of Steven Adams, this team has added Reed Sheppard, and that's it. And Reed Sheppard is getting some minutes, but he's not at the point yet where he's really making a big-time difference off the bench. So I don't know how you would expect this team to be much above 500 overall when you consider that they really haven't added anybody outside of Adams.
I still think there's a move coming for this Rockets team. I think they fully anticipate a disgruntled star before the deadline, and they're going to be willing to use just some of this collection of young talent they have. I think they're cognizant of the fact that like you can't have a core of 8 guys, right? Like you can't have this ever growing core. At some part, you got to commit to 2 or 3 of those guys. These are our stars. Use the rest to go get somebody. Use some draft capital. I think that's the position they're in. I think they're kind of like the Clippers, before they went and they got Kawhi and Paul George. Like they were a collection of good, gritty, very good basketball players that had a fair amount of assets to make some things happen. Then they got their stars, and then they were ready to run. This team's still waiting for that superstar. Whether one of the guys we paid morphs into that, or you've got Amen, you've got Jabari, you've got first round picks, you've got Reed Shepard, you've got Cam Whitmore if he can get back and show some things. You might go get somebody who's pissed off and doesn't think their team has a way to win anymore. Cough, cost Giannis, right? Like those are things that are floating out there. Do I want to bet the future on Giannis? Not necessarily, but like that's a star that might want out. You've got Devin Booker in Phoenix. That's a star that might want out. There are guys that are going to be disgruntled, and I think that's where the Rockets really are going to take their final shape and form.
So, I mean, I think we can both assume that this team is pretty loaded at the guard position. So, if you had your druthers, would you want a small forward star or would you want like a center star?
I'd want like a stretch 4. I think, it depends on who are we trading, right? Like if we're keeping Sengun, like I want a guy who could stretch the court and let Sengun work around in space, who's maybe just a more polished, better version of what you want Jabari Smith to be, right? Like instead of a guy giving you 12 and 8, I've now got a 20 and 12 guy playing the 4.
Because I'm looking at this team right now. I think to me the weakest spot is the 3. Unless you're going to play Eamon Thompson there for any extended minutes, because Dylan Brooks is he's not a scorer. He's not a consistent enough scorer. So to me, like what were to happen if like Miami were to blow it up and say we got Jimmy Butler? Do you want him?
I think that'd be an interesting one, especially if you're giving up Dylan Brooks, because with Brooks, like he is a stopper, right? Like every championship team has that guy, right? Like Shane Battier was a big part of the Heat's championships for a reason, because you just need somebody who your job is to stop that other guy. Like Ron Artest was a valuable player in the league for a long time because he was able to go out and shut down guys offensively, or at least make them have a very long, laborious night. And you'll get your 20, but you shot it 30 times to get it, right? Like that guy is valuable. I don't know if Dylan Brooks is the best version of that guy, but it's who we have right now.
Yeah, and Jimmy Butler is that guy who can score.
Right. But Jimmy wants to do, like Jimmy's a very different type of player, right? Like I don't know if he necessarily fits into what we're trying to do here. That'd be a question that there'd have to be some conversations with Jimmy. Like, here's how we play here in Houston. Like, I don't want some of the things we've seen portrayed out in the media to happen here with a young basketball team. I don't want any schisms the way that happened in Minnesota.
That's kind of the same thing with the Giannis, I think, is that, Giannis would probably want, to touch the ball way too often. To me, the value of this team is that you've got a multitude of guys that can go off. I think what this team is missing is that one guy who said, I'm going to get you 20 plus points every night. I don't think we have this guy on that team.
I think we do. I think Jalen Green's that guy. I mean, Jalen didn't have a good night tonight, and he got you 21 points. Like, Jalen will get you 20 every night. I don't think he's efficient enough with them. I think you've got to have – the thing about James Harden was when it wasn't working from the field, he would find a way to get to the free throw line 15, 16 times, right? Like, Jalen doesn't do that enough. He's 7 of 21 to get his 21 points. Like, the guy takes a lot of contested shots, of jump shots. I think he's a better complementary player. Like, I think you saw even again, I think the comparison for Jalen, his ceiling is Dwayne Wade, right? Dwayne Wade was never a great jump shooter. Dwayne Wade was a streaky jump shooter. Dwayne Wade was a guy who can get into the paint and wreak havoc. Dwayne Wade played his best basketball next to LeBron James, right? Dwayne Wade was able to do so much more when you had that steady presence on the floor of LeBron that has to have so much focus and attention paid to him that now the coverage on Dwayne, on Jalen in this situation is more one-on-one. And now he can do what he does best, which is get in the paint and wreak havoc.
Yeah, the guy I would compare him to that's currently playing is Devin Booker, like you mentioned. Because if you look at Devin Booker was never good enough on his own to lead a team to the promised land. It took getting pieces around him. I think Jalen Green is ideally a number 2.
Yeah.
A number 2 option on your team. And the problem is right now, I don't think Sengun is quite good enough to be number 1. I think he's an excellent player. He's a guy I love having on my team. And, I actually think things move more efficiently through him than they move through Jalen. But he's just not quite – he's not a joker yet.
Yeah.
Not quite on that level. So I would love a guy that can be that every time out, I'm getting 20 points. You mentioned Harden. Harden's a perfect example because Harden not only got to the line, Harden was getting 10, 12, 13 assists a night. So you need a guy who's going to be that dominant offensive player who's going to do something positive for your team every night.
I think what you hit the nail on the head, right? You've got a couple guys on this team that would be fantastic second options, but you don't have that guy yet who's going to propel this team forward. Even taking it past the James Harden era, T-Mac was a guy that you knew was going to give you, in a time where teams were winning games, 89-80, T-Mac was going to give you 21, 22 points. He was going to account for 7, 8 assists. He was going to give you 10 rebounds. He was going to account for 30% of your offense when you look at his assists and points. You go back even further, Hakeem. Hakeem was going to give you, 20, 25 points. He was going to give you 10 rebounds. He was going to draw a lot of attention and get open looks for guys. Those guys, their points are great, but it's the eyeballs too, right? Everybody has to game plan for what they're going to do offensively. That just opens everything up. When the Rockets come to town and you could just play your regular straight up defense because they don't have that guy. We're just going to play great defense tonight. We don't have to worry about one single player. And hey, hopefully the Rockets can find a guy that's a mismatch. They can take advantage of that. Now everybody's scrambling. But if not, and we're just evenly matched, that's when those games become a little bit more hard because you just don't have that guy who says, oh, I'm going to go take this bad boy over.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, let's make a little quick trip down a free agency lane. Some expensive guys out on the market. Astros have some top talent leaving the team. There's some predictions on where they'll go that are out from MLB Free Agent Tracker, I believe is the website, Scott. The top 3 out there.
There's multiple sites. There's multiple sites out there that are predicting these things.
Top 3 Astros free agents leaving are Kikuchi, Bregman, Justin Verlander. Scott, any thoughts on some of the early predictions?
So the predicted contract for Bregman was 7 years, 182. So that's $26 million a year.
Not my money, but do it in a heartbeat.
Okay, I think I would do that too. And so if not Houston, where do you think would be his best fit?
Playing second base for the Yankees. It would suck, but I don't think Torres is coming back. I don't think Soto's coming back. I think they're going to get outspent on Soto, and they got to do something after losing the World Series the way they did.
Yeah, I think that's but one of the things that's kind of underrated, and obviously Scott Boras is not going to consider this because Scott Boras is an ass, but Bregman is projected to hit more home runs in Houston than every ballpark except for one. And I think that's Coors. But Houston, he's gonna be solid 20 to 25 home runs. And I think if you signed him, I don't think he does what he did this last year where he bulks up trying to go, I'm going to hit 40 home runs. I think Bregman kind of is going to slide in and is kind of realize this is who I am. He's going to go back to the guy that probably takes more walks. And he's going to be that Bregman of old that, we're used to. So I would do that contract. Now, second contract here, Tim. Kikuchi, 3 years, $60 million.
All day. I mean, again, not my money, but I think that's a good deal for him at the level he pitched last year with the Astros, right? If you get that guy again, $20 million a year for a starter who's giving you that type of outing each and every time through the rotation is a no-brainer. However, he's never pitched like that outside of Houston.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I said this in my article, and I got taken to task because like, oh, yeah, he's better than that. And I'm like, his career ERA plus is 91. What that means is that he's 9% worse than the career average. If you looked at what he did in Houston, he was a 140 plus. He didn't have anything within 30 points of that in any season of his career. Now, I don't know who his representatives are, but to me, if I'm him, I want another sabermetrically minded organization. I want another one that's going to go with the decision science.
He's a Boris guy.
Boris is not going to give a shit. But to me, if I were Boris, I'd be like, if Houston's not going to give you that money, let's take a look at Baltimore. That's a nice ballpark for pitchers, especially fly ball pitchers. And that's a team that hired most of the Houston, stat bros. So that's an organization I feel like would take most advantage of his abilities if you weren't in Houston.
I don't disagree with you, but I think that's going to be a Jordan Montgomery situation where it's going to bang around. It's going to take longer. He's going to take a deal with a team that probably is going to end up regretting it simply because he doesn't perform that way.
Well, and the reality is that we are 7 or 8 million as we stand right now underneath the tax threshold. After your arbitration eligibles, I'll get theirs. So they've talked about trading Ryan Presley. Okay, fantastic. That clears about 14 million, but you're still a little over 20 million. So if you sign Bregman, you're done.
I think you got to be willing to pay. I mean, at the end of the day, I think there are teams that are willing to pay the tax and there's teams that aren't. And I think at this point in the Astros dynasty or where you're at, right, it's going to be a little bit more expensive if you want to keep doing this. And I think at some point you got to be willing to pay.
Yeah. And then, so the third guy, JV Verlander, 1 year, 12 million. So are you in on that one?
Probably not.
Yeah. And especially if you're talking about throwing money Kikuchi's way and Bregman's way. I mean, you're blowing a hole through that tax.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it is, I guess, is that you're going to have the Montero money and you're going to have the Abreu money clear after this year. So, that's what, 30 plus million. So maybe you're only blowing a hole through the tax for 1 year.
Yeah.
But then you're also talking about Fromber. You're also talking about Tucker. So, I mean, that you're in a tough money situation right now.
Now, if I don't get Kikuchi, if I could get Verlander for 10 a year for 10 million, I'd be interested in that. But I don't see him taking that. I see a team like Detroit throwing him 15 million for the year.
Yeah. The teams that I saw mentioned were the West Coast teams. I saw the Giants and the Dodgers mentioned. And the Giants, that's not a bad play. That's a great ballpark for pitchers. And I could see them sitting there saying, hey, this is a guy for 1 year that we think, could solidify our rotation. My problem with JV is I don't know if he's going to give us 150 innings.
No, he's not.
And I want a guy, if I'm going to pay a guy 12 million, mean, Odorizzi was about that kind of player, and he was a guy that gave you about 140, 150 innings. I wouldn't mind an Odorizzi type if you're going to get, pay that kind of money.
Yeah, I think it all just depends on if you can get Kikuchi or not. But let's keep this train rolling. Now, before we get to a different part of the show, I know Scott and I want to take a moment just to make a little special comment. We're going to be changing the direction a little bit of the Scumbag of the Week. I think it was all in good fun to laugh at some of the absurdity that was coming out of part of our country and from some of the campaign things. But now at this point, we're beyond laughing, and it's no longer a laughing matter. It's an acting matter. And, Scott and I have our Substacks. We have our other areas that we'll address those items. But just for our own peace and personal sanity, we're going to try and transition the show more towards just staying on the sports side of things, and the Scumbags of the week are going to be sports related, and the horse's ass will kind of drift back more to its original form, which is the get Jesus Brian Abreu, or I'm sorry, Jose Abreu or Rafael Montero out of town award. So I think we're going to start making that transition a little bit.
Yeah, okay, so you want me to lead off with the horse's ass?
Yeah, let's go that direction.
I'm not, in light of Tim's comments just now, I don't want this guy kicked out of town. I'm giving him side eye. And the guy I'm giving side eye to is Nick Caserio. Because let me just run through this here. The Buffalo Bills, would you consider them a contender?
Yeah.
They went out and got themselves a wide receiver. Pittsburgh Steelers, would you consider them a contender?
I think you have to, yeah.
They went out and got themselves a wide receiver. Baltimore Ravens, would you consider them a contender?
Yeah.
They went out and got themselves a wide receiver. Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah.
They went out and got a former Texan, and he's paid immediate dividends.
Even non-contender Dallas Cowboys went and got a receiver.
Well, and not only that, and non-contender, the New York Jets went out and got themselves a wide receiver as well. So I don't understand. Maybe, and I get it. You're working the phones. It's not like he's sitting on his hands, but you couldn't find one backup lineman that could come in here and just be another body. You couldn't find another wide receiver that's better than Xavier Hutchinson. Because I'm actually going to switch my, when I do my hat tip, I'm going to switch gears here because I'm going to mention a guy, but I'm sorry, I've seen enough of Xavier Hutchinson. This guy can't get open. I've seen enough of Robert Woods. Robert Woods is not a starting wide receiver in the NFL. Right now, you've got, if Nico Collins is healthy, you've got two wide receivers. And you've got a third guy I'm going to mention. But if one of those two guys, Tank Dell or Nico Collins, is not healthy, you ain't got shit. And that's the problem right now. And so you did not go out and get anybody to help this team. And normally trade deadlines, you don't see a lot of movement in the NFL, but it's very glaring when every single contender in your conference went out and got somebody. Some cases, multiple somebodies. And you didn't do anything.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like, chance to get better, and you didn't do it. And that really, really cost you at the end of the day. I'm going to go Jerry Jones. I think his comments regarding using shades were so asinine. Especially because they use shades for other events, so it's not like some unheard of thing. Like, he just refused to do it. So I think it's ridiculous and just classic Jerry.
Well, I love the 80-year-old plus pulling out the stats of, we've played 52 games with the sun shining through the building, and we won a majority of those games. It's like, fantastic, Jerry. You're the home team. The home team is supposed to win a majority of their games. And you've been, the division champs probably most of the last 20 years. You've shit the bed in the playoffs just about every year. But I would expect for you to win a majority of those 52 games.
Exactly. All right, Scott, take your turn with the hat tip.
Hat tip. I didn't mention this guy, John Mechie. John Mechie gets my hat tip because, he showed up. I'm not going to say he balled out. I mean, he caught, I think, 4 or 5 balls, cut the team's only touchdown. So, I mean, let's not, go way ahead of ourselves and sit there and just lop up, what we're, and talk about the fact that this guy is going to be the second coming of whatever. But here's what I like to see moving forward. I'd like to see some 3 receiver sets, and I would like to see John Mechie as the third wide receiver with Nico Collins and Tank Dell as the other 2 guys. Let's see what happens for the rest of the year. Let's see if John Mechie can replicate that performance. Because if he's a guy that can get you 4 or 5 catches a game, that's perfectly acceptable for a third wide receiver. I mean, over a 17-game schedule, that's 60, 65 balls. If your third wide receiver is catching 60, 65 balls, that's more than fine. Okay, so, and the other key is Xavier Hutchinson. I shouldn't see you on the field. I'd almost rather see Steven Sims. I'd almost rather see Robert Woods exclusively if you have to play a third guy and Nico or Tank is not available. I don't want to see Xavier Hutchinson anymore. He was a nice story at Iowa State, caught over 100 balls. I was happy when they drafted him because I was like, hey, this guy was productive in college. Maybe he's going to be productive in the pros. But, he was a 5th or 6th round pick. If we're being perfectly honest, 5th or 6th round picks hardly ever pan out. Stephon Diggs did as a 6th round pick, but you shouldn't be expecting that. We shouldn't be running out this, well, Tom Brady was a 6th round pick. 6th round picks, normally are in the league for a year or 2, if at all. So the fact that he caught 100 balls at Iowa State, at the time, I thought, I was on this show and I thought, hey, that's a nice pick. This is a guy that was productive in college. He hasn't done it. He's proven to you time and time and again that he just can't get separation. Maybe he's telegraphing his routes. Maybe he's just not quite fast enough. But John Mechie showed me something on Sunday night. He showed me that maybe this guy could be somebody moving forward, and I'd like to see more of him. And, we've done enough, trashing of him on this podcast, even though he's a cancer survivor and cancer absolutely sucks. And I, have to do an, extended hat tip to him for beating leukemia. Hey, I don't know how I would fare if I got a similar diagnosis. So, tip to that guy for fighting hard, making it through it, and a tip to cap for him for being there, the next guy up, and making some plays in that football game that, made it to where you were in the game. But I'm done with Xavier Hutchinson. Absolutely. So we're getting Tim back on board. So Tim, just so you're aware, I went with John Mechie as my hat tip because
Good choice.
I think he balled. I'm not gonna say he balled out. I mean, it's not like he had 200 yards receiving or anything like that. But I've seen enough of him to think he could be a decent third wide receiver with a healthy Nico Collins and a healthy Tank Dell.
No, I think so. I think he's a quality player who, through tragic circumstance, it just took him a while to get going, right? But hey, he had a play that needed to be made, and he was able to make it. So he was one of the few wide receivers who was able to make a big play in that game. I'm going to go 2 hat tips this week, Scott. And one's going to be a little bit more sports-related, one personal life. I popped into the Bayou City myself last night, got there about 9 o'clock, went and bought a new vehicle at what is now Tillman Fertitta Chevrolet there in Clear Lake. My third vehicle from the dealership. And I got to tell you, Scott, if you're ever need a new car, it is the most pain-free car buying experience you could imagine. They get you in and out of there. I've worked with the same salesperson 3 times in a row now. Great experience. Take good care of you. And it's just there's a lot of dealerships that put a lot of extra bullshit fees on things, and that's just not how they do it. And I appreciate that. And there's a reason I drove to Houston to buy a car. So I tip my cap to what is now Timlin Fertitta Chevrolet. My sports hat tip, I'm going Tari Eason. Tonight, 18 points, 10 rebounds off the bench and a win. And going all the way back to October 31st, there's only been one of those now 8 games that he has failed to score double digits off the bench. He's averaging per 36 minutes this year. His numbers would be like 18 and 10. So basically exactly what he gave you tonight. He went down probably a little bit because he was 0 for 2 tonight, but coming in tonight game, 38.2% from 3-point range. I mean, the guy is exactly what you need off the bench, right? Like this is the Carl Landry type energy and tenacity with a 38% clip of 3-point shooting. This is what this team was missing last year. Tari Eason was hurt for a majority of the second half of the season, and the team got off to a great start and then tapered off a little bit until Jalen Green got hot. I think they're missing this energy from Tari Eason, and we've seen it here these last 7-8 games. He's a difference maker coming off the bench for your Houston Rockets.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent call. And I didn't mention him when we were mentioning the other players because I knew you were going to bring him up. And the thing is that for your team to be significantly better than 500, as we stated, you really didn't change the personnel that much. So somebody, at least one somebody, has to come in and play a lot better basketball than they've played before. And so far, that's been Tari Eason.
Yeah. His mom's as much as I was bummed to lose Ryan Stanek's wife as a member of like the Houston Twitter community, because she was a great follow. Tari Eason's mom is fantastic. She is a great follow. You can just tell how much of a fan of her son she is, and how fun it is for her to watch him go out there and achieve his dreams of playing in the NBA, right? Which, Scott, you're a parent. I'm a parent. Nothing would make me more than happy than to see my child achieve their dream. And just being able to watch this lady's reactions on Twitter are heartwarming and phenomenal. And she's just a real gem and a pleasure to have with like the Houston sports Twitter community.
I'm going to do a second hat tip real quick here, Tim. I am a proud dad this week. My daughter, Ann, has been officially accepted to Sam Houston State University.
Bearcats.
And it's really her safety school, to be quite honest with you. But this kid has worked really hard, and we don't tell her often enough, but she's got she's got a 4.9998 GPA, which is, fraction away from magna cum laude, which I fully anticipate her getting after this semester because she's currently has all A's. But, and she's tackled the college application process, which I can tell you is a whole lot more complicated than when you and I were going through it, mainly because she's trying to get a music scholarship on top of everything. And the music programs kind of add on a layer of difficulty that we didn't have. So I'm a real proud dad this week.
Yeah, that's awesome, Scott. The first one, it's kind of like it's like sex, right? They come in bunches. So hopefully the next flurry of letters trickle in here shortly as well. And
I'm not making that analogy to her.
No, but I hope you get to make the fun decision with your checkbook for TCU a little bit later. The old legacy checkbook decision.
Absolutely.
All right. Speaking of spending way too much money, let's talk scumbags.
Scumbag.
There we go, Scott.
All right. I was gonna go in one direction, Tim, but something happened this last week.
You went to a Diddy party. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that was something, Tim. But what I was going to say is I'm going to try to make this is more personal and try to keep this out of the politics. But my dad's a heart patient, and he calculated that he has been in the hospital 22 times in the last 12 years. And so unfortunately, one of the things we've learned is that he has 5 stents in his heart, and stents don't last forever. Apparently, they have a life expectancy of 10 to 15 years. His oldest stents were 15 years old, and so he had to have some redone. And apparently, they have a new procedure, a balloon, a drug-coated balloon that they used to put in the leg that they've made small enough to now put in the heart. Each of these cost $12,000 a piece. So he is on Medicare / TRS insurance. And they decided that he had this thing scheduled to do this last Friday. They decided like Tuesday of last week, no, we're denying you. You can't get it done. So my dad's cardiologist said, okay, here's what you do. You go into the emergency room and you complain of chest pain on Thursday. And so you go into the emergency room, and on Friday, we'll get this thing done. Now, for his part, he was a man of his word. They got it done on Friday. But when they went in, I mean, think of this. We've heard of scenes like this in war, but they didn't have enough rooms. And so he was stuck in the hallway on a stretcher for hours at a time before they were able to get him a room. They botched his dinner to where they didn't have his dinner. And so they just saw one lying around that had been lying around since noon and brought it to him at about 7 o'clock. And what happens when food's lying around for 7 hours, Tim?
Foodborne illness, Scott.
Then it gets cold.
That too.
So, yeah, he did not want any of that. So it was not a good experience. And most of it, I think, is at the hands of insurance. And they just, because they're basically saying we don't want to pay the $12,000. So we're going to figure out a way around this. And so we're going to deny it. So that's basically what that was all about.
American healthcare system, it's only going to get better. So, yeah, that's certainly
a word.
Yep, that's certainly scumbag worthy, Scott. I'm really tired of the group of Texans fans who think you cannot criticize aspects of the team and still call yourself a fan, right? To me, that's the scumbags this week. The ones who immediately hop to Facebook and say, well, if you say Bobby Slowick's a problem, you're not a real Texans fan. Like, no, I'm literally a realist Texans fan. Like, Bobby Slowick's a problem with this football team right now. Well, if you say that CJ's regressed, you're not a real Texans fan. You don't get to tell me how to be a real fan, right? Like, I gotta think outside of the Texans fans that are high school or college football coaches. I'm probably, you as well, Scott, in the upper echelon of just general football knowledge, right? Like, I am a broadcaster. I watch games live. I call games live. I understand defenses. I understand a lot of the elements of things. Like, I understand play calls. So if I'm looking at something and making a comment on it, I'm not just saying it. I'm looking at the evidence in front of me. I'm analyzing that data, and I'm giving you the results of that analysis. If you don't like it, that's on you. But you can't sit here and question someone's fanhood or fanship or fandom because they're saying something that you don't like, right? Like, at the end of the day, this is not a perfect football team. The Astros weren't a perfect baseball team. The Rockets aren't a perfect basketball team. You hope that your teams come together in a way that allow them to win a championship at the right time of year, but you're also allowed to voice displeasure. We put our money where our mouth is. We buy tickets, Fubo to make sure you watch your team, Astros hats, Rockets hats, Texans jerseys. They rebrand. Everybody goes and buys new stuff. With that, you have skin in the game, right? You are buying, at least a little bit of privilege to say we when you talk about your team, to say we need to do these things. And if as fans they can't accept that, I think they're the ones who really should be looking in the mirror and saying, am I a real fan? Or am I just am I a sycophant? Am I a cultist at that point if I'm not allowed to question our supreme leader?
AFC South Division champs, Brian. But no, I've been a football fan for over 40 years. The last time the city of Houston has seen an AFC championship game is 1979. I was 6 years old, Tim. I don't remember that game. It was against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I don't remember that game. Had a famous touchdown catch that was called not a catch, but I didn't watch that game. I didn't live and die with the Love You Blue Oilers. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I was 6 years old. What I do know is that I'm sick and tired of winning the AFC South, getting the first playoff game in the afternoon, winning that game at home, and then getting our lunch handed back to us, getting your doors blown off in the divisional championship game. I'm tired of it. I want more out of my team. Am I wrong?
No.
Am I wrong to have watched football for 40 plus years and want my team to do more than just go to a second round divisional game?
You're not wrong, because you know what? Like to liken it to, let's say, the Houston Astros, who did eventually reach that championship status. There was a time where winning the NL Central and going to the playoffs was good enough for this team, right? They did it 98, 99, 97, 98, 99, 2001. Hey, we won the division. Good job, Larry Dierker. Well, at some point, that team decided to move on from Larry Dierker, right? It wasn't good enough. Yes, you keep winning the division, but at some point, Larry, we need to do more than lose in the first round of the playoffs. Now, the managerial hires after that weren't exactly inspiring, with Mitch Williams and then Phil Garner blundering his way to a World Series loss. But eventually you got the right group of people in there in 2017 or 2015, at least with Hinch, that made it possible, right? You had the right staff, you had the right group of players, you had the right GM, everything flowed in motion. So, the Texans have some great pieces, but it doesn't mean the staff is perfect. It doesn't mean that all the players are perfect. It doesn't mean that, heck, the coach is perfect. This is his second season as an NFL head coach. He's obviously learning on the fly too. So you made a statement, I can't remember if it's in this show or the other one, but it's, you shouldn't ignore things in victory that you would bring up in defeat, right? Just because you won a game and it was ugly doesn't mean you should not mention those things. And I believe that that's a very true statement, right? Like, you've got to even go back and look at the games the Texans won and realized, hey, there were times in this game that Bobby Slowick almost cost us the game, but Kyrie Fairbairn had a 59-yard field goal. Or, hey, we won this game by 6 points, but we were up 23 points, in the third quarter, and then, barely eked out a win because we changed the play call completely and just ran it 3 times in a row. You can look through the whole season and see the same issues reoccurring. It's just now it's costing us games, right? And all those fans who say, oh, you can't bring it up, we won. Oh, be quiet, you're not a real fan, we won. Hey, now we're losing games for the same reason.
All right, Tim.
All right, Scott, I think that's going to be it for us here this week. A little bit longer episode as we were out last week. Just need a little bit of a mental break. My wife was out of town, and solo parenting is hard. I know. Third hat tip to just single parents out there, looking at that clock and knowing that even though 5 o'clock's coming, my wife isn't. There's no second wave. There's no relief behind the lines coming to give you a breather. Yeah, man. I went to bed at 8 o'clock one night.
We're still and as Tim mentioned, we're still bringing it on Substack. Tim's
I'll get back to mine. I'll get back to mine this week. I got a couple I'm going to work on tonight. I like many Americans, I needed a week. I needed to process everything that has happened.
I'm trying to go more global issues. I'm trying not to complain about the issues. Although I sent you the South Dakota news earlier this morning. I'm sure you saw that.
I did. I was in the car all day, but I did see that one. But yeah, it's follow the Substack. I got my own page for it. Scott puts it out on the Born on the Bayou Sports page as well as his page. Thoughts from a Native Texan is the page. I've got Tim's Mind Cannon on there as well. Scott's got a couple different sections depending on whether it's sports or life or politics. You can find what you're looking for there. But we appreciate those of you who found us here and decided this week we were what you were looking for. We hope to see you again next week. Same bat time, same bat channel here on Born on the Bayou Sports. We'll see everybody next time.